From Tally to Cali,
It's time
to wake up.
Wake up! Wake up!
Warchant.com is your ultimate Seminole sports source.
And this is Wake Up Warchant, presented by Corner Pocket Bar and Grill.
One more corner pocket.
Now here's Warchant.com's Aslan Hajavandi
And Corey Clark.
Wake up! What is up, everybody? It's Wake Up Warchant, presented by Corner Pocket Bar and Grill. Coming up on today's show, we are now inside of the top 3 of the Warchant Top 40. And Corey Clark and I sit down with National College Football writer Ross Dellenger to talk about expansion, realignment, and a little bit of the LSU game. We're under 60 days. I can't believe it. Wake Up Warchant, presented by the Corner Pocket Bar and Grill, Tallahassee, Florida. CPTallybar.com is your website. 2475 Appalachia Parkway, your physical address. Daily lunch specials, weekdays, Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. for only $8.99 on Mondays. Victory Burger, half-pound Black Angus burger, lettuce, tomato, onion, pickle, and a side dish of your choice. Straight fries, curly fries, onion rings, potato salad, broccoli, side salad, tater tots, or freshly cooked potato chips at the Corner Pocket Bar and Grill. Friendly reminder, Florida State football is going to be really good this year, and Warchant.com is still the ultimate Seminole sports source. Plenty of stuff going on for us this football season, whether it's the Warchant Report, which we do before every game, previewing the upcoming opponent, the Warchant Wrap, Corey and Ira absolutely killing it right after a game, breaking things down, pre-game, post-game shows with Jeff Cameron and Tom Lang. Partner up and we'll promote and help your business grow. Get at me or Tom Lang, Aslan at Warchant.com for more details. Corey Clark joining us from Parts Unknown. You went to a pretty, I don't want to say famous, but a fairly known spot for locals in the St. Petersburg, Florida area, which now maybe it's not Parts Unknown. You compared it to maybe a poor man's corner pocket.
Yeah, I'm not talking about Mons. We're not talking about Mons on this show, Aslan. What's the matter with you? I like that place. It was good, but it was not Corner Pocket. I'm not going to even give them the plug. They don't sponsor us.
Okay.
I do want to give a shout out to I'm almost positive his name was Brian. He was in town with his kids. One was at a music camp, nice. And the other one was touring Florida State. Oh. And he was at Corner Pocket, and he saw Stephanie and I walk in and told us you and I were the reason they were there. Him and his wife were there, and they loved it. And his 13-year-old son, when they pulled into Tallahassee, was like, "Dad, we got to go to the Corner Pocket." That's what we hear about all the time. So yeah, I told Bill that. So we're hopefully we're good for another year of sponsorship.
It's like you pull into Atlanta, you got to go to the Coca-Cola factory or warehouse, right. Museum, or whatever. You pull up to Tallahassee. Dad, we got to go to the CP. Uncle Corey told us.
Right.
We are also presented by our good friends over at vitaminenergy.com. Promo code WarchantBOGO. Warchant BOGO. Buy one, get one free when you use that promo code over at vitaminenergy.com. Dorothy, one of the thousands, literally, of 5-star reviews, says, energy lasts up to 7+ hours. This statement's valid. I am not an energy drink person, but this drink did it for me. Hard energy through my 11-hour shifts. Am definitely ordering more of this stuff. Maybe you want to try out the B12 14,000 plus. Packed with antioxidants, powerful energy boost, no sugar crash, 0 carbs, tastes great. Again, 14,000% of your daily value in the 336 micrograms of the vitamin B12. How about 1,500 milligrams of taurine? That'll get you going. That'll get you feeling real good in the gym. And, of course, 260 milligrams of all-natural caffeine. VitaminEnergy.com. Shake it and take it. Try it. You'll like it. Use the promo code WarchantBOGO, B-O-G-O, when you go to vitaminenergy.com. Oh, we're ever closer, Corey Clark, to revealing the number 1 and the number 2 players in our Warchant preseason top 40. I don't know, without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about who we had at 4 and 3 on our list. You want to do that, Corey? I think we should do that. Give the people what they want.
Absolutely. Let's get some football in there.
Corey and Aslan. So I think we've already unveiled number 4 on the videos. I don't think we've done number 3 yet. But we have what we call consensus, Corey Clark, you and I. I almost want to zag on myself, but I'm not going to. Corey, you and I had Trey Benson at number 4, which some guy that Pro Football Focus likes gave the privilege of creating a list of like the top 10 draft eligible running backs. And I think he put Trey Benson as number 1 on his list. So Trey Benson, number 4, undoubtedly the number 1 running back in this talented backfield that they have. I guess maybe it's just how great can he be at number 4? Is there anything that he could do this year that you could maybe see us undervaluing him at number 4? Maybe he should have been like number 2 or, gosh forbid, number 1.
I mean, maybe. We'll see. If he has like a Dalvin type year, sure. But, for what he is, I think 4 is about his ceiling, and he's very good. But obviously you guys know the people we haven't mentioned yet, and they're very, very good at their positions too. With Benson, we've talked about it a few times since spring that David Johnson, his position coach, said he left 200 or 300 yards out there last year for not hitting holes or making the right cuts or running hard enough. I would like maybe a little more consistency. And a lot of it wasn't his fault, but it seemed like there were games where he'd have 21 yards, and then 3 games in a row where he'd have 140, and then another one when he had 11, and that was a little odd. I did not like the way he ran against Oklahoma necessarily, but again, so much of that is predicated on the offensive line and what the defense is doing to you. They clearly wanted to take Trey Benson away from the offense, and that's why Jordan Travis threw for 400 yards. So you pick your poison with the Florida State offense. But yeah, when you talk about his size and speed, the combination, the power, he broke PFF's all-time record for broken tackles. Now, PFF's only been tracking it for 10 years. It's not like he beat Jim Brown's record from the 50s. But, he broke a lot. He was very, very good last year. He broke a ton of tackles. And, yeah, he's one of the best running backs in the nation. But we knew that already.
Okay. By the way, we'll talk about some maybe baseball draft stuff, but that really hot shot it's not safety. I'm in football mode. Strong safety. Shortstop.
Yeah.
Arjun Nimamala went 20th to the Blue Jays. I think that probably means he's not coming to Tallahassee.
I don't think Link was expecting him. Okay. Now, look, maybe he turns down that big. Maybe he doesn't want $6 million. Yeah. Maybe he'd rather come and play in Tallahassee for 3 years. But, yeah, I think they've known for, about a year that kid was not showing up on campus. They have another backup shortstop who might be drafted. I say backup shortstop, sorry. Backup to him, a backup plan, who's also one of the best prep shortstops in the country, who was not going to be drafted on Sunday, but maybe Monday. You're trying to hope that he doesn't have his name called on Monday.
If Benson were to run for 1,650 yards, 1,550,
okay.
Do you think that you're still fine with him at 4? Do you think that might have creeped him into number 3, possibly even number 2?
Yeah, sure. If he has a Dalvin-like year, that's a Dalvin year, right? I don't think anybody in Florida State history's run for that much other than Dalvin.
Yeah, Dalvin ran for 1,691 in 15, 1,765 in 16.
Who's third on the list? Do we know? For season rushing yards?
Greg Allen probably or something. I don't
know. It might be Cam Akers, or it might be Warwick Dunn. I think Warwick Dunn had 1,200 one year. But if he's up there in that neighborhood where he's averaging 100 yards a game, then yeah, man, he might jump. I just don't foresee that because they do have other running backs. They don't want him to have 30 carries a game. They've got other guys that can share the load, and they're going to be throwing the ball a bit more. But yeah, I would say I would change my tune if he runs for 1,550 yards, and that would probably equate to 20 touchdowns. Yeah, because that means he won you some games, right? Probably.
Yeah.
You would say Dalvin in 15 won you a few games, just like Johnny Wilson last year receiving won you a few games. If Trey Benson's running for that many yards, that's 600 more yards than he ran for in 2022 when he was really good. So yeah, I'd say he might be deserving of higher than 4.
2016 Dalvin. All-time leader, single-season rushing yards, 1,765 is the net. You want me to give you what he gained or the net?
Probably net, buddy. Yeah,
right.
The net.
He netted 1,765, and then number 2 is Dalvin Cook. The year prior, 2015, he netted 1,691. Third, Warwick Dunn, netting 1,242 in the year 1995, year of our Lord.
And none of those seasons were good enough to get invited to New York. Not even to win the Heisman. Just you don't even need to be a finalist. What did Warwick Dunn and Dalvin Cook ever accomplish on a football field, everyone?
All 3 of those years, though, New Year's Six Bowls. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, I feel like if you have a running back run for 1,500 yards at a place like Florida State, you're going to have a good season, I feel like.
All right, let's go to number 3 on our list. We'll probably unveil that as a whole company here in the coming days or so. You and I both had Johnny Wilson, Corey. I don't want to zag on our guy here. I could see like maybe of these. I don't want to say the top 5. Of my top 5, I think Johnny would be the one that if I had to like go back and redo it, I might have left outside the top 5.
Why?
Man, maybe Keon's the number 1 receiver. Maybe Keon's the number 1 receiver, and maybe Jaheim's like your number 2 pass catcher. Maybe Johnny somehow has become like 3rd on the totem pole somehow. And I don't think that's not that crazy of a sort of scenario, and I don't think that necessarily means that Florida State is any worse off than what you might think right now listening to this podcast, everybody, right? Like if somehow Keon Coleman's your number 1 receiver, I don't think that's because like Johnny Wilson's all of a sudden become bad. I think it's just like Keon Coleman might be just that nasty. But again, I haven't even seen him play in person, so I don't want to short shrift Johnny, but I just want to create maybe some debate here in July 10th as we give a show to the people. But Johnny Wilson, you and I is number 3.
Yeah, and that's about right. And I feel like most people that have been paying attention to our list can probably guess who 2 and 1 are. But when it comes to Johnny Wilson, I was talking to Jeff about it for the video we did on him that's up on our site, or should be anyway. I remember. Did you ever see the clip of Steve Kerr? There was a half when Steph Curry was just becoming a superstar. It might have been his first year with Steve Kerr when they won the title and Steph was MVP, where he had a half where he was like 3 of 14 for 7 points. And Kerr pulls him aside and like shows him the stats and shows him the plus minus. And he's like, look, even though you're not hitting shots, look at what you've done for the overall good of the team and how everybody has to react to you, which is leaving all these other people wide open. Like you're good. You're helping us win. And I think Johnny Wilson, even if he doesn't have 6 catches a game, he is going to have to pull double coverage. You can't occasionally. The safeties are going to have to be over the top occasionally, and that's going to free up Jaheim Bell or Keon Coleman, right? Don't you see it working like that?
Yeah,
as opposed to vice versa.
Yes.
So because Johnny Wilson, man, he is unguardable 1-on-1. He's either going to catch it or not, but you're not going to have anything to do with it. It's either going to be a good throw that he hauls in or not, but he is almost unguardable 1-on-1, and you have a freak out there that nobody else in the country has. Like there are other 6'4" guys. And I'm not diminishing what Keon Coleman is because he's clearly very good. But every team has a few 6'4" guys, including Florida State. Nobody else has a 6'7" guy that runs like that and has ball skills like that. So he is just a unique unicorn that changes the way you have to defend Florida State. He's like Kelvin. Kelvin changed the way that Florida State was defended. He's not as good as Kelvin, at least not yet. He hasn't proven to be as good as Kelvin was in 13. But, man, he changes everything. He changes the way how a defense operates, which frees up everybody else to go make plays too. So even if he doesn't have 60 catches for 1,300 yards, his impact, just being out on the field, will be a big deal. And and we talked about this on the video too, Aslan. When it comes to Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman, I'm of the opinion of let them stay on the field more than they did last year. Yes. You know what I mean? Let Johnny Wilson play 60 snaps. Let Keon Coleman play 60 snaps. They're the starters for a reason. And I know you want to get everybody else involved, but Nick Saban, when he has 2 horses like that, he rides them. They're out there on the field the whole time. If you want to get on the field, be better. And I think that's what Florida State should do, hopefully, is Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman don't come off the field very often unless they have a big lead in the second half.
Yeah, man, I've been on the record. Like I like 2013. I was cool with just running 3 dudes out there that are the best 3 and just keep going. You're young. You're well conditioned. You'll be fine. You'll be okay. Just some weird metrics or not. But so Johnny last year had 5 drops. He had a 12.5% drop percentage. So I assume that's 5 drops on his 66 targets. Does that sound right mathematically? Or would that be 5 drops on his 35 receptions?
On his 35 receptions, I think. Yeah, that's 1 out of 7.
Yeah. So there's your math on that. He had 22 contested targets, and he caught 11 of those. So that's a 50% contested catch percentage. Meanwhile, Keon Coleman had a grand total of 3 drops last year on his 58 receptions for a drop percentage of 4.9%. He had 16 contested targets, and he caught 10 of those for a 62.5% contested catch percentage. So there's your advanced metrics, kids. But there was 3 interceptions thrown in his direction as opposed to only 1 for Johnny, which kind of goes back to your point of just throw it to 14. It's going to work out.
Yeah. So. I mean, you're just really lucky to have those 2 guys. I mean, you have two of the better, as those stats allude to. I mean, I can't imagine most guys with that big a sample size are catching 50% of contested balls like that. That's NFL type stuff. Jordan Travis is lucky enough to have two of them. And yeah, man, Florida State has, like we've talked about, they might have, if not the best, one of the very, very best 1-2 wide receiver combinations in the country. Just keep them healthy.
And just, we don't have to name names, but just think about where we were 2 years ago, 3 years ago at wide receiver, and then now where you're at with this talent that you have. It's
really though, Aslan, not just that. Like 8 years ago, like since that 14 team, really 13, 14, that era when you had Rashawn Green, it's not been a great run for Florida State receivers. This is the best it's been since 2013.
Try that. Who was our number 2 receiver in 14?
I mean, Travis Rudolph, as a true freshman.
I guess Nick O'Leary, maybe, if you want to call it pass catcher. But in terms of like wide receiver, yeah, that's because Ermon. We were hoping like Ermon Lane was going to come set the world on fire as a true freshman. Didn't work out, but yeah, it's great where we're at. Maybe having a head coach that was a former wide receiver helps out in that aspect. Who knows? Yeah,
and I guess would Bobo count as maybe on the third? I don't remember how much he played in 14. I think he played a pretty good amount. But yeah, it wasn't Nooney, it wasn't Kermit, it was So again, this is the best 1-2 combination they've had absolutely since Rashad and Kelvin. Now I'm not saying they're as good as that crew because that crew was incredible, but if they could be a reasonable facsimile, you are going to have again one of the best 1-2 combos, and then who knows what Winston Wright is like, and everybody else that's at Kentron and all those guys. But man, that's a really, really good outside combination you got there.
Rashad had 99 catches for 1365 in 2014. Number 2 wide receiver in terms of receptions was Bobo. He had 42 for 527.
Yeah.
Travis Rudolph had 555 yards though.
Yeah. This is better than that.
Yeah. What about Nick Cole? Would you take 48, 618 and 6 touchdowns combined from Marquiston and Jaheim, or is that not enough?
No, that's plenty. That's awesome. What is that, 4 catches a game from your tight ends? That's good. That's good production, especially considering what you have out wide.
Okay. That was Nick O'Leary.
If you're catching 4 catches a game and then your other wide receivers are catching 15 a game, you're putting up a lot of points, I think, and a lot of yards.
Okay. All right. All right, we didn't get to talk about this. You've covered him for longer than I have, obviously, Corey. You've been doing this longer than I have, and you did a really good feature on him a while back. But a big shooter, known to a lot of fans out there, Chip Baker. We didn't get it on the show last week. We record a little bit earlier than we usually do, trying to get out of town here. But Chip Baker, man, swan song. I wish we could give him a little bit better of a swan song than what we gave him in 2023 on his way out, but a guy who's been so selfless and given his all for so long to Florida State baseball, stepping away from the program, man. And shout out to Ira for catching up, or Jeff rather, Jeff Cameron catching up with him, and Ira catching up with him as well. Thoughts on what Chip Baker's meant to this program, and just kind of sad to see guys like that leave. They kind of represent the old guard of college sports. It feels like,
Absolutely, and it kind of reminds me of I know the sports are different and maybe the impact on the sport was different, but when Mickey left, it just reminds you that they probably aren't going to be many guys like this anymore involved in universities for 40 years. Chip Baker, if you don't know, Chip Baker was married at Dick Howser Stadium back in the 80s. I think it was in between double headers where the players lifted their bats, touched their bats, and they walked through. That represented the aisle. He came in the 80s. He stayed with Mike Martin for 20 years, about 15 or 20 years as an assistant, and then became like the director of baseball ops when 11 hired his son. Chip still stayed with the program, and he was a guy that coached third in Omaha, and then he was also a guy that when the team went to Omaha, while I was covering the team, Chip Baker stayed at home and ran the camps for Florida State baseball. Like you were talking about somebody that is just true and true Florida State baseball. He's the guy that started the spiked baseball tradition for shutouts in football. He used to give them to Mickey every time there was a shutout. He'd put a spike through a baseball and give it to Mickey. And that was one of Mickey's favorite collections that he had. He's just a guy that harkens back to the early 80s. The back when I was a kid growing up on Florida State sports. He's, like you said, he's kind of the last of one of the few left holdovers from that era. And just, yeah, man, it's awesome for him that he's getting retired. I hope he gets to enjoy it. But it's sad, too, that Chip Baker, who's been a part of Florida State baseball and Florida State athletics for so long, is no longer a part of it. Just reminds us we're all moving on. We're all getting old. Not you, though, Chip. You're young forever, my man.
Yeah. Do you think the proliferation of these high-octane college offenses in football made it easier for Chip to step away? Because he's like, all right, man, I don't have to drive nails through baseballs anymore, probably.
He certainly had to stop. He didn't have to keep buying nails. Nobody shuts out anybody anymore, so he got to get rid of that tradition. But yeah, man, probably. But again, I did write a story about him maybe a year or two ago. Yeah. Just about, I think he was coming up on his 30th. It was either his 30th or 40th year. I should have done some research, Clark. Come on. But give me a break, guys. I've written a lot of stories. Yeah. But Chip Baker, just his stories and how he got to Florida State, how he stayed at Florida State, how he fell in love with it, and how it became just a part of who he was. And really, when you talk about people bleeding garnet, there aren't many you would put ahead of Chip Baker, right? Like, he's just been doing it for so long. He's seen so many sporting events. He's been around the baseball program for over 2,000 wins. It's 4 decades. He put in a lot of time, and a lot of it too, right, Aslan? He's not going to have a statue built of him. He's not going to have anything named after him. He was just behind the scenes for so long, whether it's scheduling, doing the radio play-by-play, doing the internet play-by-play, organizing schedules, organizing camps, being the guy on the road that organized meals, buses. Like, this is what he's been doing for the last 20 years, man. So I hope he gets to enjoy retirement and take a break. But I just hope I hope he knows how appreciated he is by people that have been around Florida State sports as long as we have.
And if you're listening, Buster, maybe make him feel the love, make him feel that recognition. Buy a wing of the stadium and make it like the Chip Baker Players Lounge. Come on, Buster.
Are you talking to Buster Davis or Buster Posey?
Posey, but Davis can chip in too if he feels like.
Exactly.
Basketball-wise, let's touch them all, Corey. Here on Sunday night, as we recorded the program for you folks, the Florida State basketball program released a statement from Coach Leonard Hamilton that Chandler Jackson's been suspended indefinitely from the basketball team. No other really details out right now, but Jackson from Memphis, Tennessee, went to Christian Brothers Academy, 6'5", 215, wing player for the Noles. One of the guys he kind of felt, there's scratches some talent on that surface there, and I guess maybe they have it now. Perhaps it's not doesn't bode well, obviously, for where he's going to go, but he obviously has plenty of time to turn around, get back in the good grace of this coaching staff, and do what he has to do to get back on the court for this team. But he's a guy that certainly they had big plans for.
Not a good sign. I have no idea what happened. I'm not going to speculate. But I do know that I've been doing this now for about 15 years, covering this basketball program. I'm sure there has been another instance, but I don't remember many of somebody being suspended indefinitely by this coaching staff and by this head coach.
In July.
And when it's your second year and the system gets turned around, doesn't mean he won't be available to practice on the first day of practice. But not a great sign because my thought would be, if it was something that was going to stay internal, which Leonard likes to do, he'll punish guys and not let anybody know about it. Well, this is something that we all know about. Like, how would we know if Chandler Jackson was suspended indefinitely? You know what I mean? Yeah. Sitting here in July, unless the school announced it. Well, the school announced it. So that means that we were supposed to know, and that means that it was something that Leonard thought was, worthy of letting everyone know. And we'll see what his future is at Florida State, but that is not a good sign that this is publicly known and that we have no idea when he'll be coming back. Because, again, he's just a sophomore, and you're right, you did see some stuff from him. I mean, nobody was great last year. That's why their record was their record. But you saw some stuff that you liked from him, and you just hope that he can, maybe get past this, maybe be ready for preseason, because the last thing he needs is to miss another preseason. Because that's what he did last year with his broken hand, and he never really got back into the swing of things like they hoped he would. And, so hopefully this is just a blip. It's a wake-up call, and he ends up winning the Bob Cousy Award in 2 years at Florida State.
Hey, how about Cameron Fletcher, man? Cameron Fletcher making moves off the court. Shout out to our guy. He's got like a really famous girlfriend, apparently. I think.
That's not our business, Aslan.
All right. Well, there's a thread on I saw a thread on the basketball board, but you folks can check it out over warchant.com.
My son did tell me about it. He texted me and asked me if I knew that. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't follow him on Instagram, but apparently, yes, he does have a famous girlfriend, or at least somebody that he's friends with that is famous.
All right, shout out. We're going to get Ross Dellenger to talk college football right after this. But first, mybookie.ag, promo code is WARCHANT. Use that for your instant cash deposit bonus, giving you more leverage to pick winners, whether it's the sports book, whether it's some futures, some live betting, or the casino. It's all there for your liking over at mybookie.ag. I don't have someone, should have someone pull up and ready to rock and roll. Florida State back to plus 2,000 to win it all over on MyBookie. It's swelled up to 3 points now, Corey. The line is 3 now. They're catching 3 from the Tigers for the opener on September 3rd. It was 2.5, I think, right? Was it 2.5?
LSU's favored by 3?
By a field goal, Corey.
Break. That's easy money. Bet on the Noles. It's not going to be close, gang.
I kind of want to tell people to take Duke plus 12 against Clemson, too, because I feel like I've been talking a lot about Duke this preseason, so I need just to go ahead and, stake my claim early on. Or maybe we'll wait till that total comes out. Because whatever it is, I'll probably want to take the under because, first week, defensive-minded guy, quasi-freshman quarterback for Clemson and Klubnik. Right. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But whatever you have a sort of hunch on, you can check it out over at mybookie.ag. Just make sure you use that promo code WARCHANT when you sign up. Get that instant cash deposit bonus. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with mybookie.ag. A couple more breaks. Then we got our guy, Ross Dellenger, talking football right after this. As advertised, got Ross Dellenger on the program. Ross dialed into all things college football, realignment, NIL, even some LSU stuff we'll talk about. Ross, thanks for taking time out, man. How are you?
I'm good. How are y'all doing?
Good, man.
Good, man. Good.
Ross got his own podcast. He'll talk about his own personal life on that. The College Football Inquirer with Pat Forty and Dan Wetzel. Is that what it's called?
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
All right, check that out. All right, Ross. So we're looking at things obviously from a Florida State-centric point, and realignment is obviously on so many people's minds because we see what the SEC and the Big Ten are doing. And I guess to a certain degree now we're seeing what the Big 12 is doing. From a distance, me personally speaking, I don't know how serious I was going to take the Big 12 once they lost Texas and Oklahoma, but they seem to have rebounded quite well. Is the Big 12 right now better positioned than the ACC, would you say?
Oh, man, that's a tough one. I guess it just all depends on your perspective in how you're going to determine that. If you're going to determine that from just purely a money situation, from television revenue distribution, total media rights deal. I think they're so comparable that it's hard to say one is that far better than the other. And now the thing about that is the Big 12's new TV deal is likely to come open again before the ACC's TV deal ends in 13 years.
We're all likely to be dead before the ACC's deal ends in 13 years.
It's a long one. Yeah, it's a long one, and they're paying the price for it, so to speak. And so I think from that vantage point, the Big 12 could jump them in whatever it is, 6, 8 year, whenever their new deal comes open. Because they'll re-up again, and they could re-up, and it could be more valuable, especially from a basketball perspective. We've seen that league, basically ascend to the top of college basketball, and only getting better with some of the new teams they added, like a Houston in Cincinnati. So I think maybe down the line, sure, that can be said. I think that's a hard one to say right now. They're so comparable right now. Their TV deal's pretty comparable. I think from a football perspective, minus Texas and Oklahoma, and then you look at the Florida States in the ACC and the Clemsons and even Miami and North Carolina. I think from a football perspective, the ACC probably still seems to have that edge. But I think the value of the Big 12 is going up, and I think it could go up again dramatically when their next TV deal is up, and the fact that that will come before the ACC's TV deal certainly could put the Big 12 ahead of it.
Do you, Ross, in your heart of hearts, and you're dialed into this stuff as well as anyone, do you think that the ACC will be a thing in 2036? Do you think that the current landscape will be that Florida State is in this conference in 2036, waiting for this grant of rights to run out? Or do you foresee another one, maybe the biggest seismic shift of all in the next half decade or so, where Florida State, Clemson, Miami, they end up in another conference?
I would be a little surprised if the current members of the ACC are all still members in 2036. That would be surprising to me. I think that there's enough drive by those teams you mentioned to the point where they gathered other teams and had a group of 7 that had conversations for 5, 6, 7 months, pretty serious conversations. I think more serious of conversations than probably is led to believe or has been reported. I think there was somewhat a commitment to something needs to be done now. The problem is they just didn't have any good options, and I think that it fizzled late there. And when I finally wrote about it, it basically had exhausted itself, and that's not to say it could get rolling again. But all of that whole situation kind of tells you that the league isn't in a very stable position, and I don't think, because of the growing revenue gap between the ACC and the Big Ten SEC, I don't think you're going to see those schools, the Florida States, the Miamis, the Clemsons, and maybe the North Carolinas and some others stand idle and wait 13 more years. That would be a surprise.
All these schools, Ross, have lawyers and anybody all hands on deck trying to figure out ways, whether it's to get out of the grant of rights or reach out to other conferences to see what the interest level is. Like, what sort of dominoes, if you're like a Florida State fan, like need to fall? Because I think Florida State would love to be in the SEC, just a hunch. But like, what sort of dominoes do you think have to fall in the next 2 or 3 years that opens expansion back up for conferences like the SEC and like the Big Ten? I mean, I listened to you on your other podcast, and you were talking about the Pac-12 was so ready to expand, but then maybe the more you think about it and you start adding more heads to the table, your pie gets a little bit smaller, as you said. So, I mean, Florida State, Clemson, do they bring enough to where, this seems appealing to the SEC if a couple more dominoes fall, you think, out there?
Yeah, I think for I think that with what Clemson and Florida State and the Miamis need is obviously, as you mentioned, like an invitation to the Big Ten or the SEC. They need that door to open. And in order for that door to open, you do need another wave of dominoes in realignment. And that probably starts out west. And in that story, when ACC meetings got cranked up and we dropped that story about the 7, like a big part of that story was the dominoes that could be set off in the Pac-12, depending on the Pac-12 situation. And here we are, right, July 6th, and we still don't know about the Pac-12's long-term viability because they haven't announced or signed the media rights deal. So if and I think 2 things could happen here, right? They can sign a good deal or good enough for their members, and they all stay together, and that's they move on, and the deal is probably short. It's probably 5, 6, maybe at most 7 years. And so for at least those amount of years, things are stable. Option 2 is chaos, is a deal, and this would be what the ACC's group needs to happen, is option 2, and that is the Pac-12 not getting a good enough TV deal, 2 to 4 teams breaking away and joining the Big 12, the Big Ten, looking at teams like Washington and Oregon, for instance, just kind of sitting out there. And at that point, they'd be fairly desperate. And you wonder if they'd take a partial share to join the Big Ten. And you wonder if the Big Ten would open that door. From that point, then you have the more domino situation happening, where if the Big Ten grows, the SEC might look to grow as well. The problem, of course, with the ACC schools like that we're discussing is that grant of rights. However, I think in places like Tallahassee and in places like Clemson, I think they're in I don't want to say panic, but a somewhat desperate situation where they would or might challenge it if those dominoes do happen. But they do need a lot to happen, because I think the Big Ten and I think the SEC right now is pretty content with the teams they have. I don't think they really want to reopen the door to expansion.
I've been telling people, Ross, I think Florida State's best entry into the SEC, kind of touching on what you just said, is goes through the Big Ten. I think the SEC already has the state school in Florida, a big one.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
The Big Ten does not. And the Big Ten has won one national championship. What have we said in 20 years? Bringing Florida State and Clemson, or the threat of bringing Florida State to Clemson to the Big Ten, might get the SEC's wheels turning. Like, no. If Florida State and Clemson and Miami join the Big Ten, well, all of a sudden, buddy, we're equals. Like, the Big Ten's as good as the SEC almost. You're talking about huge national powers in one conference with Michigan, Ohio State, Florida State, Clemson. Like you said, Washington and Oregon. So do you think that might be the way that it becomes competitive between the SEC and the Big Ten, where Florida State and Clemson land?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. They for the SEC to open its door, the Big Ten would have to show interest, or they'd have to expand in some way. I do think that is the case. And you're right. You nailed it. And I wrote about that in that story in mid-May. As I know Florida State and Clemson both feel like SEC teams and schools. However, for the SEC, they don't offer as much benefits or value as teams or schools like North Carolina and maybe even Virginia, who are located in states that the SEC doesn't have a school. And that's important for, and it gets kind of complicated, but, having a foothold in a state does produce more shares for you in these media contracts. And so the SEC already has the Florida share. They already have the South Carolina share. What they don't have is North Carolina and Virginia. And of course, the Big Ten doesn't have any of it. So, yeah, absolutely. I think that you could see down the line here, a Big Ten SEC race for some of these schools if the ACC doesn't somehow find additional revenue and make everybody content.
Right. We try to be as objective as we can on this show. I mean, I'm an alum. Corey's covered the program for a long time. But is the national appeal of Florida State, does that supersede, the Virginia market, the North Carolina, Charlotte television market, you think, Ross? I mean, does Florida State's brand still carry as far as, most Florida State fans think it does, do you feel, in these circles that are, being talked about?
I think that winning helps, right? So there seem to be in football specifically, and the media rights deals have gotten to the point where many of them are, they used to be like football was 75 to 80% of a media rights deal. Now it's more like 90 to 95%. So football is of the utmost importance, and winning at football is of the utmost importance. So Florida State needs to start consistently winning at football, and it seems like they're on that track. It does, so I think that's the best way to do it. That's the driver to do it. Is sustained success, and we've seen that out of Clemson. The issue, from Clemson's side is are you one personnel move from not having that anymore with Dabo, or when he leaves or whatever, it does Clemson still win at the rate that we've seen? And I think other conferences think about those things. What's the sustained success of the program in general, historically, their resources, their value. But winning at football is the way to do that.
And I think Florida State is also like Clemson, but Florida State even more so. I think their ceiling, when they're good, you see what the ceiling is as far as ratings, as far as interest around the country. Just everything that goes with being a big time college football program. When they're good, they're right up there with everyone. That ceiling is really high. It's just the end of Jimbo and all of Willie. We didn't know the basement could get that low, Ross. We didn't know that Florida State could dip to where it was in 19 and 20. But so it was cool, and I think that will hopefully Norvell gets this thing rolling. And speaking of Norvell, it keeps it rolling. Will you be at the LSU Florida State game? Will you be in Orlando for that?
A good question. It's certainly on my list. Yes, to try to get to. We usually don't. I usually don't finalize those things until like late July, early August about where I'm going early in the season. But I do hope to be there. I mean, that's a big one. That one feels. Last year when they played, I remember going into that. I was there in New Orleans, and I remember going into that game thinking, this is probably a game, maybe for the win. It felt like the winner was going to be a 7 or 8 win team, and the loser was going to be a 5 or 6 win team. And lo and behold, right, but both teams ended up being really good. And in this game, feels like the winner has a chance to make the playoff.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
Florida State had the benefit last year, Ross, of having that week 0 game. LSU obviously breaking in all new staff. We saw Jaden Daniels at the Manning Passing Academy. He talked about his level of confidence and just how much more comfortable he feels with that offense. Jordan Travis seems to be like the headline player in this game. I mean, how much have you heard about Jaden Daniels' growth and progress? Is the confidence that he shared at the Manning Passing Academy, is that something that the coaching staff and the players around him kind of also share?
Yeah, I think so. What he did in year one in a new system was pretty stunning, and it says a lot about his athleticism, just his pure athleticism and playmaking skills. So you think about what he did just a few months in Baton Rouge, and now he gets got a whole nother year, a whole nother off season and summer work and all that. I would and what they need, and they know this, what they need to do is probably protect him more. He's a little svelte and not the biggest guy. And so I think that's important. And from Florida State standpoint, they seem pretty loaded on the front and could be pretty nasty. So that would be trying to get to him, and getting to him is going to be very important.
This is my last question, Aslan, for Ross. But is there a scenario where I like the Nussmeier kid? He's pretty impressive, and he threw for 300.5 against the national champions in the SEC championship game. Is there a chance that you could foresee if LSU has 7 or 10 points at half and Jane Daniels is 6 out of 14 for 37 yards, they could make a switch? Like, will that be a QB battle in August? And will that be a battle that could go back and forth depending on if Jaden Daniels plays well or not?
So this was a big kind of storyline in December, after we saw Garrett Nussmeier do what he did in the championship game, and you kind of thought, Jaden Daniels. A lot of people, I think, thought Jaden Daniels was just a one year guy at LSU, and then he'd go to the NFL. And there was a sense that he would go to the NFL, especially if Starr was pretty high there. And the fact that he didn't tells me that he's going to be, barring injury or something, he's going to be the starting quarterback, and he's going to get the full reins. But man, as I was talking about earlier, he's really athletic. He makes plays. He's on the run a lot. LSU's offensive line, certainly early last season, really struggled. Any nick or injury, which he could be prone to have, you'll see Garrett come in, and they really like him there. The staff really likes Nussmeier, and again, I think there was a lot of thought that this would be some kind of hot
Yeah.
quarterback battle, and that Jaden might even again leave and go to the NFL, but he decided to stay. And again, the fact that he decided to stay just tells me, and I think Brian Kelly's been somewhat public about it, that he's the guy. But they definitely have a capable backup for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the receivers might like Nussmeier. It just seemed like the
Mm.
passing offense flowed a
Mhm.
lot more with him in there. Daniels can make plays scrambling around and then hitting a guy downfield. But man, Nussmeier looked like the real deal.
Yeah, they like him down there.
Ross, I know in the spring the offensive line was really thin. I think there was, they converted defensive linemen to play on the offensive line. So I don't know how much of that they've been able to shore up. But defensively is I don't want to call it weakness, but whatever sort of deficiency is the concern that the back end of the defense with Matt House coming to his second year as a coordinator on defense for LSU?
Yeah, and we saw. I think it was in the Florida State game. We saw LSU really struggle in the secondary. It was one of the worst secondaries I feel like that LSU had in a while. They just gave up big play after big play. These just giant chunk plays, and I don't know that they've shored that up. I think that's probably going to be something that gets rectified a little more in fall camp. That the talent feels there, but everybody's got to get on the same page. There was a lot of miscommunication last year with the LSU secondary, and they rounded into shape later in the year. But Florida State really exposed them, and I'd assume they'll have a similar game plan this time around.
Well, we hope to see you out there in Orlando, Ross. But we'll be reading.
Absolutely, yeah.
In the meantime, follow him on Twitter, everybody. Ross Dellenger. Thanks for the time, Ross. We certainly appreciate it, man. Let's do this again.
No problem at all.
Thank you, Ross.
All right, that's a wrap for all of us here on Wake Up Warchant. Thanks again to Ross Dellenger for jumping on, talking some football with us for a little bit. Corey and I will be back with 2 more shows, I think, minimum this week. Following week will be pretty interesting as well. Stay tuned for details on that. Maybe not interesting for you folks. Well, hopefully interesting for you folks, as you're the ones that listen to the show and help keep this thing going, and we appreciate the heck out of you for it. Maybe we'll do a mailbag, maybe a live show. I'll try to talk to Corey and convince him, maybe coerce him into doing a live show. But anyhow, we'll do our best to fill this little feed of yours up. Just make sure to subscribe, hit the thumbs up, 5-star rating and review. We'd appreciate the heck out of all of y'all. For Corey, I'm Aslan. Thank you for listening to Wake Up Warchant, presented by the Corner Pocket Bar and Grill.